Welcome, everyone, to the Christian Fiction Fans Book Club for May of 2025. We are excited and delighted to have Kathleen Basi here, the author of A Song for the Road, which we've been reading this past month. And I'm just going to give you a little background bio on Kathleen, and then we'll jump into some questions for her. So here is the official bio. Author and liturgical composer Kathleen M. Basi is a mother to three active boys. Read that, always breaking something. I can relate, I have four boys. And one chromosomally gifted daughter. A proud native of flyover country and an honest to goodness farm girl, as in cattle, hogs, chickens, grain bins, and a combine. She spent her childhood climbing trees, jumping off hay bales, and chasing cattle back into their pasture when they broke through fences. But she never once tipped a cow. Road trips are familiar territory for her as she took several 3-week RV trips with her grandparents. She saw more national parks in her first 10 years than many people see in their entire childhood, probably in their entire lifetimes. And she loves exploring new places, especially the food. Her degrees are in flute performance, and she has been involved in music for Catholic worship since she was 10 years old. She's been writing stories even longer than that: school bus, first grade, Orphan Annie fanfic. She believes the written word and the sung note should make the world a better place. That doesn't mean pretending ugliness doesn't exist. The world is messy, and pretending otherwise just makes it harder for everyone. She aspires to acknowledge the reality of the world while pointing toward what makes it most beautiful. I love that, Kathleen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop the share so we can see your face a little better here and listen to you. I'd love if you would just start by sharing your author journey. How did this come to be? Did you always want to be an author or suddenly got the inspiration? How did it all happen?
I think probably this is a pretty common answer among writers that we just always did write. It was never really a choice, it just sort of happened. I talk in that bio about being on the bus, and my cousin, who was a year younger than, or younger, older, whatever. We were first and second graders, and sitting in the back of the bus writing stories on the way home. And she was writing ET, and I was writing, you know, fanfic about Orphan Annie. And we tried poetry and things like that. And I ended up writing a lot of I just always wrote for my own enjoyment. And it was really, I wrote story after story after story. Most of them are terrible. And I was in college, grad school, maybe even before it occurred to me to look up how long is a novel, and I realized I'd been writing novels for years. So
Wow.
that was so then I started getting serious about kind of trying to learn to write on my own, but it still took a very long time to get to the published stage.
So you said you've been writing novels for years. Does that mean you have the proverbial drawer full of novels that have never seen the light of day?
Yes, I wrote a trilogy. They were all princess fantasies for a long time. I had a whole trilogy of books about this one princess who became a queen, and it was very Lord of the Rings knockoff. Um, and then I wrote some other. I did a lot of derivative kind of things. I tried writing short stories that were based on this series called The Young Riders, which was Western. I mean, I'm very eclectic in what I enjoy. I have four kids, and three of them are boys, and so we do a lot of superheroes in this house. So I'm into Marvel and Star Wars and Star Trek, and all of those things have an impact.
Yeah, for sure. So these hidden former stories, will they ever see the light of day? No.
Yeah.
Those were just the practice novels.
Well, also I've changed genres now. So I'm writing contemporary. book club fiction now, so
Yeah,
that's a different beast.
sure.
And the conventional wisdom is that you can't cross that way.
Yeah.
um, when you're publishing, you have to have a brand, and so my brand is the real world and looking for beauty in the hard things.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it gets really tricky with online algorithms with Amazon and things like that if you're writing different genres and trying to find the right readers. So, yeah, well, I love your contemporary stuff, so I say we'd love to see more of that.
I hope you will.
Yes. So you have also won some awards. Notably, Kathleen and I are both in the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and you've won the Rising Star Award in both 2014 and 2016. Tell us a little bit about what that award is and what you submitted each of those years.
Well, a minor correction is that I was a finalist in 2014,
Oh,
but
gotcha.
I won it in 2016.
Okay.
The Rising Star is a competition that WFWA puts together, and you submit the beginning of your novel and a synopsis, and then you get feedback from 5 judges or so who are either published authors or at least agented authors. So, in other words, people who have some knowledge and expertise in the industry, and that's extremely valuable. But at least the year that I won, what my prize was, there's no money attached to it. The prize was that I got to have a phone call with a really well-respected literary agent, and she did not offer me representation, but she told me some. We had a very frank conversation, and it was very educational for me to learn how my work hit a literary agent. If you guys don't know, the literary agents are kind of the gatekeepers to the publishing industry. A lot of the big 5 publishers will not accept submissions from just your average Jane who comes in and sends them an email and says my book is great. It has to have gone through a very intense round of vetting first, which is what the literary agents do. So that's what that Rising Star is all about. In 2014, I was writing a book that was set in Napa Valley and wine country. Um, and I still hope that book has been through a lot of iterations, and I really hope that someday that one will see the light of day. But right now, it's been shelved because there was a problem that my agents didn't know how to tell me to fix. So I've just set it aside for the moment. And then in 2016, I won with a book that has been completely retitled because the title it sounded very romancy, and that entire plot line that it was based off of has gone away. But the book still exists and is the one that I'm trying to sell now.
Gotcha. So you had neither one of those is the debut novel that we read. So
Nope.
tell us about that process from you've got these 2 works in progress, and then how do you get an agent? What was that process like for you?
Well, you query, you write a 1-page letter that takes you a long time, and you send it to the literary agents who read it and ask for more or don't. And they answer you and tell you they want more, or they tell you no, thank you, or they don't answer at all. And you go through that, and at some point, you send queries on one book while you're writing another book, and when you're ready to query that book, then you let the old book go and you focus on the new book. And that was kind of my life. Actually, there is another book that I have debated pulling out a couple of times. I just don't think it's quite up to snuff compared to what I'm writing now. It is in the right genre, but it's not quite up to snuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one, that one just kind of sat there by the wayside. And then the book that was set in wine country had a little bit of traction, but not really. And so it was time to just, while I was querying that, it was just time to write another book. And so I had either let's go back to this book that was set on the farm that won the prize and completely rethink that, or let's write this new book that's based on a road trip. And I picked the road trip book because I thought that having the structure of the road trip meant it would be easier to write.
Not true.
Not true, but it did turn out. It did turn out beautifully. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very happy with it too. Absolutely. So how long did it take you to get an agent?
Well, I think that I sent my first queries in. You're not going to want to hear this. In 2012 or 13, I want to say, and I signed with my agents in November of 2019.
Long
So
time.
it was a long time. You have
Yeah.
to be really persistent in this business.
So at any point in that process, did you ever consider, you know what, I'm just going to self-publish because it's
No,
taking so long, or that was not for
no,
you?
because I'm not good at that. And
Hmm.
especially at that time, I was not good at it. I didn't have a network of people. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a newsletter. Now I
Yeah.
have a pretty robust, well, I have a reasonably robust for me newsletter. Um, and I have more understanding and I just know more people. So I can, they say it's about who you know,
Sure.
and that's true, but it's not just about contacts. Like, part of the reason that A Song for the Road has done well in this small press world is because I have this broad um, professional network on Facebook of friends who are in church, friends who are not godly people at all, but like my writing friends, liturgy friends, friends from, I have a huge family, my husband's family, but also my mom has 9 siblings.
Wow.
So I have like 35 or 40 cousins. So like just the fact that as you open up about these things and you start to publish a few short stories and things, then people start to realize that you're serious about this. And so then I was not prepared to self-publish
Hmm.
in that time. And I knew that I've never been good at the tasks of talking about yourself, of putting yourself forward. Even now, I struggle to do that. I sort of look at it as I will do the thing I'm meant to do when it's meant to happen, all things in their time.
Yeah.
And so I tend not to push very hard. And my husband gets annoyed with me and wants me to. Sometimes he will break into my calls and push harder on my behalf, which is, you know, I never know how well that actually works.
Right. But for a lot of people, that's a very difficult thing to do. What you're describing is being patient, and
Yeah.
in our world today, we're all so driven and we got to make it happen. And to be able to relax into that and know that in the right timing it will come, that's really a beautiful gift that you have.
Well, thank you. Yes, that is a gift. It's not something that I can take credit for. My husband is standing over here drumming his fingers and staring at me, and I don't know why. Oh, he heard me talking about him breaking into my calls, so he decided he needed to break into my
You
call, I
thought maybe
guess.
break in today.
She needed to put a
Here he comes.
helicopter
Here
explosion
he
in her
comes.
book, and then it would have been perfect.
Ah, there we go. Need
Oh,
more
he's so funny.
action, more superhero stuff. Well, it sounds like he's at least read the book, so that's a plus.
He was my last round reader, and he found about 4 or 5 continuity errors that no
Wow.
one else had caught in the process of publishing. So that he is a writer himself. He's
Okay.
a public relations and a media guy, so he knows writing. We argue a lot about the pluses and minuses of the Oxford comma, which I like and he does not. but but we both write. So our poor kids.
Yeah. Or your blessed kids, they probably have just this natural talent because it's coming from both sides.
They have natural talent for music, I will say. I don't it's kind of dark back there, but I set this up so that we could see the grand piano back there.
Yes, yes, I do see that. And I'd love to talk about that for a minute. So, besides being a writer, you're like an amazing musician and composer. So, tell us a little bit about that side of your life.
My parents were, my mom sang around the house all the time, and it was, she used to come into the bedroom, and I swear she would sneak into the room and go around the beds, trying to be as quiet as possible so that she could like grab the shade and let it come flying up and start singing roll out the barrels. And I just because she thought it was funny, and we hated that, but she sang a lot. And we lived on a farm, and we were barely making it. And so we did a lot of gardening, and we did a lot of canning, and we raised and killed our chickens, and so we had to process the chickens. And so there's a lot of memories that are around that involve singing. But also my parents were both song leaders at church, and so we just sat with them at church for years. And then when I started playing the flute, my teachers started asking me to come in and play my flute at mass, and that I just really never stopped. It actually got to the point where I got good enough on the flute that they would never let me sing anymore. And then I got really upset. And when I got to college, I was going to study music, study flute, and I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to be involved in church music anymore because I was sick to death of never being allowed to sing. So it took some time in a failed relationship with an atheist who, before I was ready to go back, before I was like, you know what, it's time to go back. It's time to go back and get into this again. And interestingly, I met my husband in the choir, church music in here in Columbia, where I live at the Newman Center at the college church.
Wow, interesting. So, you play the flute, there's a piano in the background, or do you also play the piano? Any other instruments?
I fake it at the piano. I can play my own music reasonably well. I go around to churches and do talks and reflection nights now, um, and do some storytelling with that. So that's fun. Um, I play at church when they need some coverage, but I have very specific requirements on what kinds of music I can play. If you go to your Foursquare hymnody that changes chords every beat, I can't play that. I'm not good enough to play that. My husband can play anything that you put in front of him. He was the
Okay.
piano player in the choir when we met. Um, I say I fake it, so I do better at the more contemporary things that are like one chord per measure. Have I
Yeah.
lost everybody yet? Or do we have musicians in the house?
I play the piano as well, and so I'm not as much of a musician as you are, but I am following you a bit. And I agree. When there is a chord every single note, I would much rather play like a contemporary like pop song where you're
Right.
just rolling your fingers around the keys than having to hit all
and
those
I
notes
can
every
and I
single.
can make it up. I play from
Right.
chords more than I play from what's on the page. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I can read it all. I just can't. I could learn to play them. I just don't have time to practice. I do have the capability of learning to play those things. It's just I can't do it in an efficient enough manner.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, that's church music, and then I started writing music for that contemporary ensemble that I was involved in, and where I met my husband. We had piano, guitar, bass, a drum set when he was there. He was a congressman actually, um, and then we had probably 10 to 15 singers, and we had a rotating group of instruments. And when I we're at a different parish now, and my husband started an ensemble that looks very much like that. And that's the ensemble that I write for now, as I'm thinking about the people that I'm singing with day in and day out.
Yeah. So now, but you also play the flute like in some orchestras or
Yeah,
something like that too?
it was a summer orchestra. It's called the Missouri Symphony, and it was just a summer orchestra that they had a festival every summer. And they're sort of reimagining how that ensemble works now. So there's a season of about 4 concerts during the school year, as well as a shorter summer thing. And I am the new kid on the block, so I play third flute and piccolo. That's seniority, whatever.
Yeah.
There are rules that go around all of these things. But I'm really really enjoying it. We just played 2 weeks ago. We played a concert of music from, there's a Japanese film studio, Ghibli, I believe it's
Hmm.
pronounced, and it was beautiful music. It was so fun, and we had a whole different crowd. They sold out the auditorium, and
Wow.
everybody was really excited. It was fun.
So neat. So, so far in the last 5 minutes, you've described like four different careers, plus being a mother of four children and being a writer. And how do you fit the writing in to all of this like professional important stuff that you do?
I don't do anything enough, and my house is not clean. I moved this thing around like 5 times so that it would look like something I was willing to share with people.
Right. Yes.
What I am looking at does not look like this.
I hear you 100%.
I am scattered too much. I've actually been working in this calendar year on setting boundaries and learning to say no to things,
Hmm.
on multiple levels. Um, it is very hard, you know, those whom to those whom much is given, much is expected.
Hmm.
And so then I live with the sense that I am obligated to do everything,
Yeah.
and I can't, even though each of these individual things I could do and I could do a good job at, but I
Yeah.
cannot collectively do all of them.
Right.
And that's a hard lesson for someone like me.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, when you have so many gifts and you don't want to hide your light under a bushel in any of those areas, definitely a difficult decision as to what stays and what goes, what to say yes to, what to say no to. But I don't know, we're all impressed with all the things you're doing. So,
Well, my kids also, I had I started out with the expectation that my kids would all go to the same Catholic school and then go to the public high school, which is what I did growing up. And my first one made it through the 8th grade, but my second one has Down syndrome, and they could not help her. And so she was in the public schools to start. So we had one in the Catholic school and one in early childhood special ed, and then in the public schools. And then the next one started in the Catholic school, and they went for a while, and then the next one started in the Catholic school, and the first one graduated, and so then there were 3 schools when he went to high school, um, and then the 3 schools went for a long time because my youngest had apraxia and had trouble learning to talk, so he was
hmm,
actually in early childhood special ed for a while as well. So we had 3 schools going on for a while, but when COVID hit, there were 4, because they had to move my daughter in order for her to be in person. They had to move her to a different building in
yeah,
order to be in a self-contained classroom that was going to meet in person. And at the point where we hit 4 kids in 4 schools, I said, I'm done. There's no volunteering. I'm not
yeah,
going to get to know anyone at any school. All I'm going to do is get my kids there. That's it. I'm done. And now we've compacted back down to 2 schools, and I've chosen, I was like, Catholic school's pretty well covered for volunteers. I think I'm going to put my energy into the public high school.
yeah,
What
yeah,
what energy I have.
right. Yeah, there's definitely choices to be made along the way. Well, let's get back to A Song for the Road. And you kind of told us a little bit about this already, but tell us, how did the book come to be? What, you'd already been writing some other things, and it seems like you had the idea for the road trip, but what inspired that idea? And then how long did it take you to write it?
I have this, I have a strong belief. I tend to write about inspiration and I put IN capital SPIR because I think that the Holy Spirit works when we get out of the way. And generally speaking, that means when you're at the edge of sleep. So I had a dream in which I was standing in a beautiful place, looking at the place where I had lost my entire family, and it wasn't a nightmare. It was beautiful and poignant. And I woke up with that feeling right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, now that there, just that nugget. There was a lot of detail in that dream, but I can't remember any of it. I just remember what I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, there's a story in this. And it took a long time. I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And it took me a long time to figure out how to streamline it down to its essence. I'm a big believer in critique groups because they help you to recognize when you are overcomplicating things. Um, so that was that dream was really the impetus behind it. And like I said, I thought it would be easier to write because it already had this vehicle
Yeah.
to but it turned out to be a very complex story to write emotionally.
Yeah.
And I knew it couldn't be a downer. There had to be humor. I knew she
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be in the car by herself the whole time
Right.
because nobody wants to, you know, nobody's going to read a whole book of somebody in their own head.
Yeah.
She had to have somebody to bounce off of, and to figure out all of those things took some time. And um, I remember the day we were actually in the back corner of this basement having a meeting, and one of my critique partners said, I think this is the one, Kate. I think this is the one that's going to get you
Oh,
there. And I was like, I said, I think so too. I think so too.
how cool. So when I hear you tell the story of waking up from a dream where you're at this spot seeing where your family was killed, my thought is, oh my gosh, it's an omen my family is going to be killed. But you knew it was a book. You knew it was a story.
That's interesting. Nobody has ever said that. I'll bet many people have thought it and just never had the guts to say it. Ah, that's interesting. No, that actually never occurred to me. I think the thing is that by the time I had this, I almost lost my daughter when she was 6 weeks old. She got RSV. This
Mm,
one who's coughing in the background went to daycare and brought home RSV, and it went through all of us and hit her last and hardest because she had holes in her heart. She had an
oh,
ASD and VSD, which are the horizontal holes in the heart. Um, and she almost died. We were in the NICU, or the PICU, excuse me. We were in the PICU for 10 days, and she was baptized
mm,
in in the ICU.
wow.
We had her baptism scheduled, and everybody was coming in, and by the time she's on a ventilator fighting for her life, and her oxygen saturation is
Mm,
plunging to the 40s, you're not going to put that off.
yeah.
So the hospital staff like moved heaven and earth and got all kinds of permission
Mm,
to get extra people in the room, and the priest came over, and my grandmother was there to stand in for the for my sister and her husband who were the godparents and couldn't get there because of a winter storm.
mm,
It was, what I'm trying to say is, by the time I had this dream about losing my family, I had already stared at that specter,
yeah.
you know, twice actually, because she got pneumonia when she was 2.5.
Mm,
And we had a lot of hospitalizations with her when she was little.
yeah. And I imagine those experiences helped you bring the depth to the story that the story needed.
Yeah, but not having lost them, I had to spend a lot of time. You have to kind of walk a line where you're, what would it feel like
Yeah.
if I, but you don't want to go too far down that road because one of the dangers of being a fiction writer that I had to get over before I could be successful is getting so deeply into the fiction world that the real world you don't care about anymore.
Mm,
And so there's a balance of being fully invested in the characters and thinking how would Miriam react to this
yeah.
versus how would I react to this? And occasionally you get stuck on what the character would do, and you have to think, okay, let's pull that filter away and actually say, what happens if it's me in this
Mm-hmm.
situation? How would I react? But you have to be careful and like do that very briefly and then step back aside in order to stay sane and have healthy relationships in your real life. That's my experience anyway.
I love that. So in your bio, it says that you have taken a lot of road trips, and this is a road trip story. I'm sure that had some informed your story to some degree. Have you visited all the places that are listed in your story? Some of them?
Some of them, the ones that are close. I live in central Missouri, and so um, I actually went to Cincinnati. At one time, it was set in Louisville because I'd been to Louisville,
Uh-huh.
and, but I got to Cincinnati before the book got to a point where it was ready to send out. So I was able to put it in Cincinnati. Um, and so the Cincinnati waterfront is a place that I had been, and Cahokia Mounds is just outside of St. Louis, which is just a couple hours from me, and we're in St. Louis all the time. My son goes to school in St. Louis. Um, and Hannibal, Missouri, Mark Twain is,
Mm-hmm.
2 hours hither thither across through lots and lots of cornfields between here and Hannibal. Um, Sorry, another one of my children just showed up for no apparent reason.
Everybody wants to come to book club.
I guess, yeah.
So you've been to a few of them. How did you choose the places for the story then?
Well, the first thing you do when you think I'm going to do a road trip is where am I going to start? Where am I going to end? And how do I get there?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, let's just look up road trip destinations. And if you Google road trip destinations, you get like all the same things. You must go to Times Square. You must go to the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
You must blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. That's like all the predictable things.
Sure.
And I knew that I wanted to do Cahokia Mounds because it's close to here and it's seriously cool. Just this huge mound that's like it's as big as a pyramid and it's just sitting there in the river bottom.
Wow.
And that's really cool. And so I knew I wanted to do that. And so I knew that they needed to come through here. But what you do beyond that, then I had to try to find what are interesting things that you might do in different cities. And so at one point in the book, Miriam realizes that there was a second set of videos that she hadn't watched yet.
Yeah.
And that she realized that there had been a north and a south route that her daughter had planned for her. And that's basically what I had to work out too. I got a great big AAA map of the United States and put these little, sticky tabs all over in all the places. And there must have been 45 or 50 and I was like, you can't do this. This isn't about the stops. It's about what happens at the stops.
Yeah.
You can't just go to the Corn Palace in South Dakota because it's really cool. There's got to be a reason for her to be there.
Yeah.
So that was ended I had to do like figure out what all of the possibilities were. Another one that just hurt. I wanted to send them to Selma, Alabama, and the Pettus Bridge, and I couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
So, it was just a matter of practicality. How far can you drive in one day, really?
Yeah.
And still do something once you're there.
Yes. So will there ever be a day when you will take this road trip?
I don't know because I might be more tempted to go to. I definitely want to go to Scotts Bluff because that place, I just something about that being up that high. It's kind of like Cahokia Mountains. It's just this
Uh-huh.
huge thing that's out in the middle of nowhere, and I that's a place I'd like to go. But a lot of the places that I'd really like to go didn't make the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So, often there's a kernel of truth in a fictional story. Are there any scenes or characters in this story that were inspired by real life?
Um, Not as many as you might think. One of the things that I would note is that an author takes her sanity in her hands if she tries to work out what she's if you try to make this a therapy project.
Yeah.
Like if your character has the same neuroses that you have, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble because eventually you have to give this character a resolution. And if you don't have that resolved yourself, spiritually, emotionally,
Yeah.
you're not going to write a convincing book, and you might end up like deepening your own neurosis
Mm.
because you feel like you should be able to figure it out and you can't.
Yeah.
So the things that Miriam is wrestling with are things that I have taught. My husband and I for taught 16 years of natural family planning, and in that process of teaching couples, hundreds of couples, how to plan their families using the signs that we,
Hmm.
of the cycles, I saw a lot. I got into many conversations about love and marriage and what does it mean and what is family, and there's many things that get wrapped into those questions because they're such intimate questions.
Yeah.
And so I already had a lot of those kinds of things. I'd had a lot of time to work those out in my own mind, and so those were the things that I was like, these are the messages that I have figured out
Hmm.
and that I really want other people to see.
Yeah.
Like this is what I want to give to the world.
Yeah.
I have a whole lot of other unresolved issues that I can't write about yet. But hopefully someday.
You're working on them, right? So it sounds like the story idea came first through a dream, and then you kind of had an idea of the message. When did the characters develop and how did they come to be? Because Miriam and her sidekick Dicey are such a interesting pair. How did you come up with them?
Dicey sort of just happened. Um, yeah, Dicey sort of just happened. And some things had to be adjusted over time with her, but not that much. Her voice was pretty distinct right from the first moment. Miriam was so angsty that it took a little longer.
Hmm.
But I think with Miriam, my husband, my husband has a phrase that he likes to tease. He says it's the brooding artist is what he calls us, um, and so that angsty kind of person is someone I'm familiar with because in music world there's a lot of us. We take things very seriously and we really internalize them, and so I think that Miriam in some ways is an amalgam of a lot of people that I know,
Yeah.
with a bit of my own thoughts. What Miriam thinks about Muzak is my opinion of Muzak, for instance. Um, and things about her like the relationship that she has with her husband when they're in the choir and they're, bickering over tempos. That's me and my husband because we
Uh-huh.
co-direct a choir together, and it's always interesting. Um, but there, Miriam, what is wonderful, I'm in the process of drafting another book now, and I'm about three-quarters of the way through it, and finally it's starting to happen where the characters are starting to speak in, like, I know their voices now.
Yeah.
And that just there's no shortcut to that. You just have to write and try to like write around it and figure out. I have like a whole document that says this is my problem solving document, and I will ask myself a question and then I'll just like free type for a
Yeah.
1,000 words about what is going on, what the problem is, what the character would think of, and just eventually when you write long enough, the characters start to speak for themselves.
Yeah.
But it generally does not happen right off the bat, at least not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You almost it's like a meeting a real life human. You have to take time to get to know them. And it sounds like that's what your process is in getting to know your characters and what they
Yeah,
would do and what they would say in a situation. That's
yeah.
cool. Sometimes we've touched on this a little bit, but a piece of the author in the characters they write. So you said there's a little bit of you and your husband in the way that they bicker in the choir. As they're a part of you that is like Miriam, because you are obviously very musical like she is.
Mhm. She has some of the same talents that I do. One thing that I can do that not everyone can do is that I play by ear,
Mm,
and I hear things in my head, and I can, you know, put them together. She has a better skill in piano. I know people who can do what she does in the
yeah,
book. I cannot do it on the piano, but I can hear it in my head.
yeah,
So there's certain things like that that are that of me that are in Miriam. I too am an overthinker. I too hold myself to impossibly high standards, and I too do not give myself enough credit. So those particular things I share with Miriam.
I love it. Um, and I loved how the book opened. You were talking about her piano talents and at this funeral where she starts doing the riff and working in a ring of fire, just working out her angst. And I was just rolling. And it was just hilarious. I loved it so much.
My mother, who is the lifelong church musician, said, "I don't think that anyone would actually do that." And I was like, "Oh, yes, yes." I said, "I know the people who have done things like that. And I know many more who have thought about it, even if their better angels prevailed."
Oh, that's great. I love it. So tell us a little bit about your writing process. We talked a little bit earlier about how you're juggling a lot of different careers and responsibilities and roles in your life. Do you have a routine where you're writing every day, or are you kind of like writing in spurts? Because right now I'm a musician for the next 3 weeks
Yeah,
and then I'm going to get back to it, or how does that work in your life?
yes. It's I have to just do whatever I can.
Yeah.
My best work is done outside and offline. I
Mm,
like to take a long bike ride out by the Missouri River, and lately I've just been needing to not work, just go out there and sit,
mm-hmm.
because you got to have mental health in place. But I have done some of my best work. However, and there are times when, well, guess what? This week music really takes priority.
Yeah.
Um, like that, the ninth of, right before Mother's Day, we did this concert with the symphony, and I had 4, 6 hours, 5 hours, 5 hours of rehearsal and a concert in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there just really wasn't anything else. But I wasn't playing on every piece. So I went off in the backstage and pulled out my computer, and I was doing one of those, okay, there's no way with all this music going on over here and rehearsal, it's distracting. but I can brainstorm. Like,
Yeah.
here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and I managed to figure out the problem sitting backstage waiting for my turn to come back on again.
Nice.
So I just have to be as flexible and as flexible as
Yeah.
possible.
So I just recently listened to a podcast and they were talking about dictating your stories. And since you were just talking about being away from the computer, getting out and walking, have you ever tried that?
I have not, because I'm about to tell you guys something shocking.
I
I
can't
don't
wait.
I don't have a smartphone. I don't like them, and I've chosen to go without.
Yeah,
So, if I had a phone, I would never actually be away. I would never be actually offline.
yeah,
Um, so I don't really have that option. I
right.
have a great big, enormous tablet
Uh-huh,
that I use to read music off of.
right.
Um, but that's not something that you carry around and dictate to.
Yes. Well, it was interesting because this person was, I think there's a book written, how is it How to Be a Dictator or something, but it's talking about authors and how they dictate because back in the old days, some of these famous authors, that's what they did. They dictated and someone else actually did the writing because you can speak it much faster than you can type
Mhm.
or longhand. And the book is old enough that the original technology was like a Walkman kind of situation. So there may be something else out there for you if you want to
Maybe.
explore that.
Yeah.
Um, but I thought it was an interesting thought of a different way to do it. And this author that they were interviewing dictates all of their books. Like they just walk around their neighborhood
Yeah.
talking, dictating it, and then there's
I will say that when I have a particularly sticky problem, I will just get up and I'll go take a walk.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it all almost always straightens out right away when I do
yeah,
that. There is something magical about that.
yeah, yeah, moving your body does something different to your brain. Well, we've been talking so much, and I haven't given a chance for anybody else on the call. If you have a specific question or comment for Kathleen, you can either unmute yourself or put something in the chat.
I'm curious about I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but the teacher, the music teacher. Did you know from the beginning that that's where you were going with all of that? Or did that just kind of develop over time?
With
Yes.
August von
With
Rickenbach.
with
Yes, thank you.
August von
Gus.
Rickenbach.
Yes.
Yes. I can't imagine why you couldn't remember that name. Yeah, it was meant to be a fussy name. I actually played with a lot of names to find one that was fussy enough. Um, I knew that she was going to have to confront him. I knew that um, he was going to be at the end of this road trip, and I knew that um, that he didn't know that he was the father of the children, but and that there was going to have to be some drama around that. But actually, that one um, took some time and several versions before it matured to what it was eventually. He he became a lot more human in that process. Actually, he was a little two-dimensional caricature when the book began, and it took some time to. So I sort of I knew the broad strokes, I guess, is the question, is the answer to your question. I didn't know all the details.
Love it. Anybody else have a question or comment for Kathleen? All right, I would love to hear. Tell us more about what you're working on. Do we have any more books that are slated for publication yet? Tell us a little more about what's next.
Not yet slated for publication. There was a book, the Wine Country book had to be set aside. And like I said, the other one we're trying to sell at the present time. And that one is about, it's set in central Missouri on a farm. And it's about a former actress who has trust issues and a deep connection to this place, to this farm where she grew up. And she lives there with her widowed mother, who does sunrise yoga and collects dates from all the men at church because they think she needs saving. And she lives and is part of what's on this farm is that she's renting another house out to her childhood best friend, who is a man with Down syndrome. That's very close to my heart, and his cousin, who is his live-in companion, and a really great romantic lead. And then it's all about how they're trying to save this farm from this unscrupulous developer who knows this rock formation that's in the woods and wants to make it into a tourist attraction. And she's trying to hang on to this place that she's so deeply connected to. And how she does that. Well, I'll just save that for right now. This is a story that is very close to my heart, and I'm very committed to getting it out there as soon as possible.
That's great. And are you writing anything else in the process while you're shopping that?
Yes, I am currently writing a book about, I'm drafting a book about um, a woman disappeared, a mother of two children just disappeared, and they could not find her for 10 years. And then she comes back, and what happens to this family when she comes back.
Interesting.
That's the book I'm writing right now.
Yeah. You mentioned that this other book that you're shopping has a Down syndrome representation, which your daughter has that. But this book that we read has cystic fibrosis. Do you know someone who has that, or what inspired you to put that in the book?
Interestingly, I knew that Dicey needed to have a medical condition, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I drew on, earlier I said that I didn't have the network available when I was younger to be able to do things. And because of the network that I have now, I was able to talk to a friend of mine who was a doctor who recommended, I told her, like, here's the broad, she's got to be well enough to be able to take this trip, but also she's got to get really sick at the end. And this doctor suggested cystic fibrosis as a good condition for that purpose. And I have two friends who are doctors, and one really good friend who's a nurse and gets Facebook messages in the middle of the night saying, I know you're on duty. Do you have time to answer a question?
I love it. That's great. Shoot, I had something else I was going to ask you about, and now it just left me. Oh, I loved the Catholic representation in this book too. I'm a person of faith, but not of the Catholic faith, and there's a lot of ritual and tradition steeped in that faith. And so I loved feeling like I could learn a little more about it through your eyes. And obviously you can bring that because you are Catholic and you are living that. Do all of your books have that piece of faith in them? You mentioned it in one of the other ones.
I am trying to figure out, it was interesting to me to reread A Song for the Road in preparation for tonight, and to see that there was much more religious content in there than I had realized. I thought I was pretty light with it when I was writing it. And I was really quite shocked to see how much there was. It's always because I'm writing fiction that is not intended for the Christian market. I'm trying to, there's a quote by C.S. Lewis that says, we don't need more people writing religious books. We need more people of faith writing books about everything else. Just to have that worldview permeate what you're writing. And that's kind of what I want to do. And so I don't want to get stuck in having Catholics all the time. But I'm trying to figure out, like, it's always a balancing act for how to evoke without it becoming distracting.
Yeah.
And in the process of the book that I'm drafting right now, it's really interesting to see the things that my critique partners flag. They're like, is this a Christian book? And they'll ask it at the weirdest time where there's been nothing religious. It was like she was going to defer to her husband because it was his ex-wife, you know?
Hmm.
And they are like, well, this smacks of patriarchy. I was like, because I have a lot of non-Christian
Yeah.
critique partners, and that's very valuable for me to
Hmm.
be able to see how it, because if we want to take this worldview and Christianity has suffered a lot in recent years, and a lot of it has been deserved.
Yeah.
And so what my hope is that we can show an authentic faith that permeates without having to beat on it so much that people can't see past that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
love
very
that.
hard
And
thing to balance. It's very, very difficult.
yes. And I think those are some of my favorite books because as I was reading books, I was feeling like, so many of them I had to filter out because the content was not where I wanted my content level to be. And and then I was like, where are my characters that are like me? That
Right.
just the faith is just a part of their life. And that's what I saw in Miriam, that it was just a part of her life. And I think we need more books out there like that. And I think your book does have a huge appeal to the Christian market, but it can cross over into other markets. And I
Too much
that's
language for it to be a Christian book.
there
Way
was
more
a little bit
language
of
than I
language.
use.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would not say that there are no Christians who use language either. So,
No, oh no. I know many, many of them. Some
so
of the best, some of the
it's
best of them.
right. It's just real life. So, well, wonderful. I don't want to keep you too long because we have reached the end of the hour, but I would love for you to tell us how we can connect with you further. What's the best way to keep in touch?
Well, I have a Substack, and that is if you're interested in yet another author newsletter. I do it once a month, and I try to tell a little story. And I like photography, nature photography, so I always share nature photos that I've taken. So that's Kathleen Basi at what is it? Now you're gonna hang on. I have to look it up. KathleenBasi.substack.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
You can probably just search on Substack. That's my newsletter, and that's how I get
Yeah.
out to those people.
Yeah, well, I'll be sure to put a link to that in our little newsletter that goes out so that everybody will know how to keep in touch with you. And I know you're also on social media and all those things
Yeah,
too.
I actually run two Substacks. The other one, I blogged for years and just wrote about whatever I wanted to, writing, faith, whatever, and it didn't work very well. So I actually have two Substacks now, and the other one is called Intentional Catholic.
Ah,
And it isn't really, the more I think about it, like sometimes I talk about things that are specific to Catholic
mm-hmm,
Church, but mostly it's about living Christianity
mm-hmm.
in the current world that we live in. So that's also there if anybody's interested.
Okay, good, good. And just a reminder to all of our book club members to please review, give her a rating on Amazon, Goodreads, wherever you can, because that helps our authors so, so much. Well, I thank you so much for being with us tonight, Kathleen, and sharing your story and sharing a little bit about your book. It's just been a pleasure to get to know you better and to hear how this book came to be.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.